All right, welcome. I am Sam Renault. I'm joined today by Mary Sirico, who is the head of talent at Octagon. Mary, thank you so much for being with us.
Sure, I'm so happy to be here.
So if you could kick us off, we're going to talk a little bit today about the process for college and grad students primarily on looking for a job, and particularly in sports. So can you give me a kind of a quick 15, 30-second spiel on your background and why you're such a good resource for this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I came to Octagon about 7 years ago, and my purpose at that time was specifically to help hire entry level recent graduates into positions at Octagon. We have something called the trainee program, which is where we place students immediately after college. And I realized that these awesome opportunities were out there. And when I was in college, I had no access to them. I had no idea that they existed. Roles like this were so cool. And I had no idea anything about them and realized there must be other people that were in my shoes. So as I've grown my career at Octagon, I've always really held on to the entry level hiring to the best of my ability because I am extremely passionate about making sure that students, recent graduates really are able to understand what's available to them and then also how to go after it.
That's perfect. You're doing a good service to a lot of people. So before we get into these questions, I didn't prep you on this, but I'm sure you've got a good off the cuff answer. Your title being head of talent, like you're really in human resources, right? For the
Yes,
people who aren't really
absolutely.
familiar with kind of the language being used here, like what is talent exactly, and how is that different from HR? Like what's the language meaning there?
So I like to say that I'm the cool HR. I am the cool HR. So Octagon has two pieces to their business. There is talent acquisition, and then there is the HR team. We work together. Talent acquisition is a piece of HR, but we also recognize that bringing in new talent is so important. It does need its own space. So my full title is head of talent and strategic HR. So I work in both sides, and then I have a recruitment team below me that works on the positions themselves and the recruiting for them. And then I work with my boss, Brian Smith, and he and I work on culture together across North America, and then help with other things in the HR space. So head of talent is really just that I oversee all of our hiring that happens. And then the strategic HR piece is how do you keep that talent? How do you make sure they're happy? How do you make sure people are growing and thriving in their careers? And helping to balance the needs of the business with the needs of the people.
Got it. I think it's a fascinating sort of job vertical being in talent and HR. I think it's something a lot of people don't realize how many opportunities exist there. So I think as we talk through this, hopefully they can glean a little bit about what you do and see your passion for this job because a lot of people are going to end up in those types of roles. So let's start with we're looking for a job, whether it's specific to Octagon or not. Where should people look? And we're talking mostly like internships and entry level positions coming out of college. What's the best resource to find jobs?
Awesome. So I will share with you honestly, if you're looking for an internship, go talk to your professors. Career Services is there to help all, right? So they are there to help every student at the college. They cannot be really all that specified in the searching and how they're helping to search. Most of the time, your professors have connections into the corporate world that aligns with what they're teaching you. So if you have a professor that's teaching you sports marketing, they likely have either worked in sports marketing, they have had it touch their career in some major way, and they're going to have extremely specific folks that they can talk to that can share out with them. So I think a really, really smart way to find those internships and to be selective and then also to help get your name forward is going to be working directly with your professors. Your professor might say to you, head over to Career Services. You might have Career Services that does a really great job with your specific major, but I would always start with your professors. And pro tip, make sure your professor is not really meeting you and getting to know you in the same conversation where you're asking them to help you find that internship. Make sure you spend the whole semester building that relationship and that this conversation is more conclusive towards the end or at an appropriate time. Maybe you've had that professor a few times. You spend the first semester just really killing it in the classroom and showing them what you're capable of, and then introduce yourself again in the second semester as I'd like to I would like to have you help me to grow my career. And then as far as postgraduate goes, truly Indeed and LinkedIn are great resources. You're going to find a lot of positions posted there. Our software honestly automatically posts to those spots. And a lot of the software out there does. So those are always very inclusive spots to go ahead and find jobs. I would say also use groups. So LinkedIn has a ton of groups available to it. You're going to find entry-level sports marketing. You're going to find entry-level marketers, entry-level human resources. Go in, take a look at who's in those groups, connect, get to know people. Your connections are going to be a huge part of getting that job. We had over 250 referrals last year at Octagon. So the referrals come in huge hordes, and we are able to go through as many as possible. But when someone's referring you in, it can really help to get you to the top of the pile. And the pile is deeper than ever right now. So I understand it's going to be a really challenging time to graduate. I graduated college in the middle of the recession. So I was in a similar space, and again, can understand the struggle, but that's why it's important to me to help you guys find places where you can actually go find roles and opportunities. But LinkedIn and Indeed are mostly up to date. So that's a good place to be. But again, those personal connections, that's going to be your best bet.
So we've talked a lot about, I mean, your professors, your career services, LinkedIn, Indeed, all of these are free resources that are available.
Yeah.
Without naming any specific companies, there are paid resources out there as well. What are your thoughts on that? Are there any that you recommend, or is that something they should steer clear of?
It's not something you need to steer clear of, but it's not something I would say you should immediately be spending money on. If you're going to spend money on a resume template. If you're going to spend money on some coaching to help you have conversations about the work you've already done, the class work you've put in, the time you've put in, and how you can make that seem relevant to jobs that you're applying for. There are so many free resources for actually finding the positions. It's about how to get yourself to the top of the stack, and then how to have a conversation about yourself. The reality is, if you get referred to us and I hop on a call with you and you cannot talk to me at all about the experiences you've had, none of the work you've done to get to the top of the stack makes a difference. So what you want to do is you want to invest in the things that are actually developing yourself and not just handing you opportunities. Because if you're handed those opportunities, but you don't know what to do with them, you're not in a great position.
There's also resources out there, and I think you bring up a great point, that you should be investing in bettering yourself, not investing in other platforms that are just going to help your current self get seen. So what about certifications and courses and things that you should be paying for? Let's say you want to get a job in social media. Are there things out there that you recommend doing for things like that?
Sure. So your personal brand is going to be one of the most important things, especially if you're looking for a job in social media. You want to make sure your own social is cohesive, coherent. You're going to want to make sure it is appropriate. I always tell people, it's not that you can't show your personality. You should show your personality. A story that I frequently share is probably 4 years ago, I was hiring for someone on my own team, and she was lovely in her interviews, but she was so professional, hyper professional. And I was like, I like to have a good time on my team. And I was like, I wonder if she, will cut loose a little and be able to just have fun conversations. We have a great office environment. And I think for someone who is very hyper professional, that can be challenging. It's not going to be that way for them on a day to day. And I remember I went to check her social media. Not really supposed to do that, but we're all being honest with each other here. So I went to check her social media and I took a look, and there was a picture of her on a train holding a beer, wearing the conductor's hat. And I was like, wonderful. She is going to be able to come in, do a good job all day. And then, we can have a beer when the day is over, and it's going to be great. So that was a positive. It is making sure you understand exactly how you're portraying yourself. It's okay to show who you really are, because you want to go to a company or a place to work where you're a value add to them. You want them to think, great, this person's going to have fun here. They're going to enjoy their work here. You can be who you are. I would just say, make sure you understand when you put things out there, what narrative that is telling. And again, you're going to want that narrative to be cohesive across your LinkedIn, your Instagram, all your different pieces should add up. As far as certifications go, I would, at any time that you're looking to make use of a certification, ask them to see, what are the results of this? Show me folks who have gotten this certification and show me what jobs they're currently in. Those companies are pitching to you. They need your business. So they are happy to share back with you the results of it. If they aren't happy to share back with you the results of it, that should be a red flag to you of, maybe things aren't going as well here. Or maybe there isn't as much ROI, so return on investment, available to me working on this program. You're going to want to go back and find places that have really reputable backgrounds. And again, asking them directly for the information is a great way to do that. The other thing I'd say, go find someone who's doing the job you think you want, and then look through their LinkedIn, look through and see what they've done. What certifications have they gone after? How did they build their career? And then look for jobs that mimic what they did, the steps they took. And again, look for certifications that mimic it. There's also a lot of free resources out there. LinkedIn Learning has a cost associated with it, but they put out free courses every single month. Go find those free courses, take those free courses, and utilize them. And you can also add those back to your profile, which is very helpful.
That's really helpful. I was about to say, when you brought it up already, the consequences of your actions. I feel strongly in all my time advising students that you should be your authentic self, because you don't want to have any misconceptions when you walk in the door and start on day one. But know that not everyone's going to love who you are. And it's for the best if you find that out early. You want to be where you're appreciated.
100%. And I have grown my career at Octagon because Brian, who oversees our department, loves my sarcastic HR self. He thinks that it's great that there is someone who wants to relate to our employees on the level I do. And he really embraces the way that I approach HR. And it's a nice change. And I think I wouldn't want to go do HR at any company. I love doing HR at this company. I love the way we approach it. I love the way our employees come and feel more open to talk to us. If I'm not a robot behind a computer or behind a desk, you're going to want to have a conversation with me, and you're going to want to have that conversation early and often. So that's the goal. And I think, again, just finding companies where your authentic self is not only welcome, but celebrated. That's the dream. That's really what the dream is. It's not 100% about exactly what you're working on, especially when you're starting your career out.
Yeah, that's great advice. So I want to go back now. You mentioned building relationships with professors is kind of step one if you want to think about growing your network as a college student. So you've already said, get to know them first. Never make your first meeting the ask. They need to know you. I think that's the key of networking, right? It's not just who you know, it's who knows you. Otherwise,
Yeah.
There's not really much value in the relationship if they aren't aware of your capabilities or your personality or anything. So first step is to get your professors to know you. How do you then take the next step? If you ask a professor for an introduction, what's your next step? How do you follow up with that intro? How do you follow up with your professor? Like, what's your sort of step-by-step there?
Yeah. So it's really important that you ask your professor that. So having custom communication plans is vital. The way one person likes to be followed up with is going to be vastly different from the way another likes to be followed up with. And you have to remember in this scenario that it's not so much about what makes you comfortable, but rather what makes your professor or the person you're trying to network with comfortable. So ask them directly, how would you prefer that I follow up with you? Would you mind if I stopped by, twice a month during office hours for us to have a continued conversation about the career path I see myself in? Would you prefer that over time I email you job descriptions I see that I'm interested in, and you can help me to plan what course load I take next semester? Ask them, but you should give them a few different opportunities for plans, like I just mentioned. You shouldn't just expect them to then have to do the labor of delivering something back to you. Give them a few options, give them what works for you in those options, but then ultimately let them decide how they would like to be communicated with, and you will see much better results. Generationally, we all look at communication very differently. I am square in the middle of millennial. I wrote my college thesis on the differences between coming from, pick up the phone technology in business and that being the main source of communication to shifting over to emails. So I'm fascinated by this subject. But you have to remember that your professors are going to have a huge range of where they are generationally, and then that may impact how and when they want to be communicated with professionally. So again, just make sure you're realizing that what's most comfortable for you, what's most comfortable for them. And it's important that you then take on the piece of shifting. It's not for them to shift.
I think that's great. I know when I was directing a graduate program, I really wanted people to follow up with me. If I made an intro and they didn't tell me, they're like, all right, I've now connected with that person. We have a call set up, and oh, the call went great, and they also introduced me. I got really frustrated if I wasn't looped in on that stream of events. And then I would be hesitant to introduce them to anybody else because I didn't even know if they followed up. I also have a really strong feeling if you're the student, I introduce you to an executive somewhere. If you're the student and you wait for that executive to respond to that intro email, That's a huge red flag for me. You've got to be proactive on that too. That's another, maybe it's a personal pet peeve, but I see you shaking your head. So
Oh, it's 100% there. I have seen, again, so many entry level applicants every year, thousands truly. And Octagon is extremely specific in how we ask you to communicate back with us, how to follow up with us as a company, what you need to do. We send out an email that says to you, here's when, here's how, here's what to do. It is completely written out and clear. When folks ignore any of those guidelines, I'm not inclined to move forward with them. There is such a huge candidate pool that I'm going to move to the front of the line those who followed all of the instructions. We take the time to lay it out for you. So the ask and the respect back would be that you then follow along, and then we can get you to where you need to go. But the communication plans are put in place so that we can help you. That's the ultimate goal.
I think that's great. I wish more companies did it that way. There's a lot of places that just kind of keep the whole thing a little bit opaque. There's no transparency in the process, and it's stressful for everybody when you're sitting and waiting and don't know what to expect. It can be challenging, especially now. So next big step is you have your relationship with your professors. Ideally, you've built them. You've started to get to the next step, like their relationships start to become yours. What about just cold reach outs to professionals in jobs that you want, at companies that you want? How do you begin to build an authentic relationship with those people?
It is with some self-awareness. That's what I would say your key is understanding if you're sending an email and you're writing in it, not to be annoying, but you're probably being a little bit annoying. So just trust your gut and trust what your gut is telling you. If you reach out to someone, feel free to follow up if they don't get back to you. I will tell you that my LinkedIn inbox it's in shambles. Sometimes I just feel like I need to start over again. But there are others where they get back to you right away. They're actively checking, they have time for this, they're going to get back to you. So that second follow-up is completely acceptable. If you're moving into third or fourth and you've heard nothing back, there are a few different things to assume there. The person may be busy, especially in our world. They may be out activating. They may be out working events for the next 3 months. And when they get back and the persistence is there, and not always in the most professional way, I think usually by the third or fourth, people start to get really impatient. They're not going to feel inclined to reach back out to you. Also remember that you're asking them for some of their time. Time is very scarce. I think a lot, especially right now, a lot of teams are running with skeleton crews. They're trying to get the most done with less people, knowing that there's less time for outreach. So you also want to make a personal connection with them when they are, trying to make that hook. So for example, when I interviewed at Octagon, I went through and obviously researched all of the folks who were interviewing me ahead of time. And there was one person who was on my interview slate who I had nothing I could find in common with, absolutely nothing. And I was like, we're going to have to figure out a way to break the ice here. And then I did a search of both of our names together on Google just to see if anywhere we could have crossed paths on the internet. And it turned out that we had played at the same golf course like 5 years before. For that individual, it had been like 7 years before. So I broke the ice by talking about that golf course. And as soon as I did, they were like, oh, I've played that. I love that course. And it was a more exclusive course. So it was awesome to be able to bring us both together. I knew what I was doing. But again, that's a passion point for that person, especially because they worked in golf. So there are a lot of resources out there. Get crafty. If anything, we millennials and Gen Xers and everybody else, you know how to go find people. Go find them. You use these tools every day when you're looking for the person you met at that party, or you're trying to see what somebody's up to. You have developed quite the ability to navigate the internet. Go use it and do it for good. Spend time figuring out who the people you're working with are. I would say don't overstep. If it's borderline creepy, maybe don't. I will share with you, we've had a couple weird things. One time somebody sent me a chocolate foot because they wanted to get their foot in the door. That one was a little bit rough. Unfortunately, someone on my team did eat the foot. That was a big no from me. And then another time I had someone who sent me a coffee cup for the grad program I had recently started. I had not shared with anyone outside of my direct family that I was going into that grad program. To this day, I still have no idea how they found out. But it was very unsettling. It was just like, all right, this is a little bit of an invasion. Even if you have a tidbit of information, find a way to bring it up more organically than just, I know this about you. They could have said to me, have you ever considered grad school? Let me start to talk about it. And then let's have that next piece of the conversation. So again, also, it's not just how you find those cold outreaches, it's then making sure you're thinking about the appropriateness of them, and then how they're going to be received. We've gotten the resumes and the pizza boxes delivered. Honestly, that just really disappoints the team that there's not a pizza in there. So if you're going to send that one, make sure there's a pizza and a resume. But I would say, just a genuine interest. And listen, human nature, people want to talk about themselves. People enjoy talking about themselves. So start off not by asking or telling them what they can do for you. Ask them about them. Wow, you have been at Octagon for 5 years working with the Olympics. How did you get from, X college to working within the Olympic game space? How does that happen? That is someone's whole career. They're going to be so excited to talk about that. So you want to talk to them about things that are really passion points for them. And again, ask them about them. They will usually take that bait and start the conversation. Then you're going to use your follow-up to then share back. That's awesome. I would love to have further conversation, or if an entry-level position on your team opened up in the future, it would be great if you could forward me over to HR.
That's great. I love the very, very thin between well-researched and creepy is a good one to stay on the right side of. At one point I had a student somehow dig up, I thought I had canceled and shut down my account and buried it forever, but somebody sent me my original MySpace profile picture once, just a couple of years ago. And I was wearing a hat from a university that I hadn't decided to go to. And their question and how they connected was, oh, like I went there. That's really, why didn't you end up going? And I thought it was the creepiest thing. And it started off a very, very tumultuous relationship that did not go well. So
yes,
I'm with you on that. The creepiness is an off-putter.
It's certainly difficult to find the line. I would just say, again, that's self-awareness. Take a step back. If this was happening to you, how would you feel about it? How would you want to be approached? Just make sure you're considering those things.
Last pearls of wisdom as we wrap this up. Any last piece of advice?
Yeah, sure. I would say make sure that you are understanding the power of the things you've done that might not necessarily be jobs. So projects you've worked on at school, any volunteer work you're doing, clubs you're in those positions, in those experiences, you have done jobs. You can build out a resume that talks about those experiences. There are some folks who come to Octagon and they have had an internship every single year of college. Internships are harder and harder to come by. There is a lot of equal pay and things that are happening out there that make it hard for companies to bring on unpaid internships or college credit internships. So you'll see that internship programs have been reduced. So you need to find ways to talk about your experiences outside of just having those internships. So yes, well, on one hand, we have folks who have had tons of internships. Very much on the flip side, you have those who had no internships, but were very active on campus or active with their sport and were able to talk about it in a conversation. So I would say don't stress if you're not someone who's been able to balance school and work. That's okay. Knowing your limits as a person is also something to talk about in your interviews. You can say, I did not take on internships, knowing that I wanted to really dedicate the 4 years I had at college to working extremely hard within my major. I wanted to be an expert in my space, and I knew that the best way to do that was to focus on my studies, have time to do the extra readings, have time to get to know my professors. That is just as important and smart, again, as applying yourself to a bunch of internships. So don't be too stressed out, especially in a time where with everything going on in the world with COVID, there are even less internships available. That is not the only way to a job, and please don't worry that it is.
This is great. This has all been really helpful. Mary Sirico, Head of Talent and Strategic HR Partner with Octagon. Thank you so much.
So welcome.